Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness, but
Well,
ours.
now,
Finger guns, finger guns, finger guns.
finger guns. Now, whenever we have a guest on the show, we always say, at the end, sort of, you're welcome back anytime you like. And we do actually mean that because we do tend to try and find awesome people to interview. But this is actually the first time one of our guests has taken us up on it all, that we, sort of kept bothering her until she said yes, whichever version of events you prefer. And that person is the one and only, the magnificent Hailey Piper. Hi, Hailey. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's brilliant to have you on again.
Hi, thank you for having me back.
More than
Always, always, and always.
Hailey's new novel, All the Hearts You Eat, is released today from Titan Books in the UK. Is it different publisher in the US, Hailey, or?
It's Titan all over the world, so it's a simultaneous worldwide release.
Yes, Titan is striving for world domination, and absolutely, why not if you've got Hailey Piper in your arsenal? So Gemma and I have been lucky enough to get advance copies of this to read, and God damn it, Piper, why is everything you write so bloody good? It's not fair on the rest of us. It really isn't.
You're very kind.
I absolutely loved it, and lots of questions. I mean, we're going to try and keep this as spoiler free as possible, obviously, because we want people to. Because most of the people who are watching this are not going to have a chance to read the whole thing yet, and we want them.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And also,
for me at least.
Yeah, it's a big beast of a book. And also, of course, you've been very active both certainly on the publishing front. I know you said the last time you were here, you've written a lot, and because of the vagaries of publishing, a lot of it was coming out in quite a short spell. But
right,
you've published since we last spoke to you. We've had the two new with her novellas in the Worm and His Kings trilogy, Even the Worm Return and Song of the Tyrant Worm. We've had, I think, No Gods for Drowning was already out.
I think so.
And another novella has come out, Cranberry Cove, which is also all of the awesome, and we need to squeeze some discussion of that, I think, into that, because and we'll try not to have it just all be like fanboying and fangirling, because this is supposed to be a serious discussion. Damn it.
Is it?
It's your podcast. You can do whatever you want.
That's exactly it.
We can dick and butt jokes, really, but try to get some serious commentary in there. So I don't know, Gemma, do you want to start, or shall I? Or
I would love it if you started, actually.
Okay, well, before we do anything else, actually, Hailey, just for the benefit of the people who haven't seen the cover blurb or the advertising, do you want to give our listeners a quick idea of what they're in for, basically, with All the Hearts You Eat?
Sure. It is about this woman, Ivory, lives in this tourist town, Cape Morning, Massachusetts. And one morning, she likes to go for a swim each morning before she goes to her job as a barista. But this morning, early in the summer tourist season, she finds a body in the waves of Cabrina Bright, a local teenager who is washed up dead on the shore. Pretty quickly after that, she starts seeing an apparition around the town that seems to be Cabrina. When she talks to Cabrina's friends, they say they've been seeing her too. And her hunt for answers as to what happened to this girl, why did she die, leads her into discovering this kind of dark secret under the town. And I think the back cover probably says it best, like, it's not a ghost town, but it is a town full of ghosts, and Ivory's about to find out what happens when you let one in.
Yes. Nice. There's a soupçon de Twin Peaks, I think.
Yes. It's definitely, that's a comp for it.
Yeah.
There's I can't help noticing that Cabrina's surname is also that of the former name of or the pen name of a very well-known trans author. I don't know if that was just a coincidence.
I didn't even think of that. No, that wasn't intentional. I was just trying to figure out what she would what her name would be. I didn't really think of it.
Yeah, there's I mean, it's sort of a vampire novel, but
Yeah, it's definitely. I've been plastering that all over social media. It's like vampires, sad vampires, sexy vampires. It's obviously more complicated than that, but just, people apparently, when it was announced and I shared first that it was a vampire novel, a bunch of people were like, oh, finally. And it's like, well, I didn't know people were waiting for me to write a vampire book. So.
Well, vampires are very often queer coded, aren't they? There's a lot of queer
Oh,
coded.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, of course, one of the things that always struck a chord with me was I think in Fright Night you have the whole bit where Jerry Dandridge comes after Stephen Jeffries' character Evil Ed, and he's got that whole thing. I know what it's like to be hated because you're different, because you're not like the others.
Yeah.
They won't do that anymore if you just take. And it struck me there's something. I mean, because vampires.
Oh yeah, Fright Night's my favorite vampire movie. So no, totally, I get it.
It's a classic, and I quite like. I mean, Jerry Dandridge is one of them. Is one of the most blatantly bisexual vampires.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yeah, with his live-in ghoul helper.
Yes, it's his roommate. I mean, interestingly, sort of Stephen Jeffries, I think, also had a brief career in gay porn.
He did, yeah.
Side note, and Amanda Bierce is openly gay as well. So kind of like, oh wow, it's a very queer film, much queerer than people realise even at first glance.
Well, that tends to be the case with a lot of queer-coded horror, I think.
Yeah, I agree. As a fervent proponent of Herbert West Reanimator.
Oh yeah, I mean,
yes, definitely.
It's like, Jesus, Herbert, just come out of the closet already, and just admit how you feel.
I mean, he's trying to, but Dan isn't listening.
No, it's true. It's true. And the weird part is that Dan probably would sleep with him because, Dan is handsome, stupid, and would sleep with anything that moves.
Well, that's the funny thing. Not to get completely off course with Reanimator stuff and Reanimator shipping, but like there's no real reason for him to be as kind of paying as much attention to Herbert as he does. Like there's how they put it online. There's no straight explanation for this.
That's true. That's true.
I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm not saying he doesn't care about Meg too.
Yeah.
But
Frampton, goddammit, how could you not?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite idea would be if the three of them hooked up, but let's face it.
Gemma, there's fan art of that.
I'll be in me bunk.
You'll have to slip me a DM. But yeah, no, it's totally true about vampires. From my very first experience with the trope of a vampire, with the idea of a vampire, it's sort of it occurred to me like really early on that it's like, yeah, blood is blood, and and the relationship the vampires have with the people that they prey on is always predatory and sexual at the same time. Yeah,
and that's definitely always there. How much, like, whether it's leaning more one way or more the other depends on, how you are presenting them. Because there's some vampires where it's done like, well, the sex is just there to lure in prey.
That's right.
And there's others where it's like, no, they are engaged in this, fully, but also they're going to kill you at the end.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing because, I mean, people, sometimes it's portrayed as a seduction and sometimes as a rape, but it struck me, and certainly something that really kind of came out for me in the book when I was reading it, is it had much more had overtones of grooming. There is that thing of how the vampire fastens onto people who are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And we often have that thing of vampires targeting, or there's there's so many articles like the slashers as well. They target people who are different. They target people who are marginalized, who are outside the norm, and use that to lure them
and people who might be more susceptible, and also sometimes people who they think might not be missed.
Yes. Yeah.
And that offering of power, that offering of,
oh yeah,
I can make you, I can make your life so much better. You just have to die.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that definite thing of, I mean, I've often found vampires, I mean, for me, as well, also kind of quite fascistic figures, because there is that kind of fascistic idea of my life is more important. I am superior. I'm more important. I
Oh
have
yeah, I mean,
no one living.
again, it depends on the presentation, which fiction, but yeah, there are ones where the vampires are like humans are cattle essentially.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it struck me as well.
Lestat.
Yes. And perhaps because the grooming element struck me particularly, because a lot of the time, yeah, you see people they're being from a Judeo-Christian kind of viewpoint. These people are being lured away from the straight, literally from the straight in this case, and narrow, and kind
So
of
to speak.
it's kind of like the morality of a slasher film. Well, that's what you get for deviating. But in this case, it really came across that these are people who are vulnerable. These are people who are in pain, who need someone who are looking, who need love, who need support, and aren't getting it.
Yeah,
And these bastards take advantage of it. And it reminded
yeah,
me of the Michael Rosen piece, "Fascism Arrives as Your Friend." You know,
right.
he wrote this thing where he said people
Yeah.
think that fascism arrives as that these guys goose stepping down the street, and they don't. They arrive as your friend. They're gonna clean the town up. They're gonna give you a job.
Right. They tell you, you've been wronged, but I can help.
That's
You
right.
just have to do this step.
Yeah.
And it's never, and it's escalating. There's a whole pipeline of it online for vulnerable young people.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it ranges from the "They Might Be Giants" song, your fascist, your racist friend, it's like on the one hand it's like this is the person that you hang around with all the time and you just sort of go, he tells these jokes, but it doesn't really matter, la la la. But to, oh, wait a minute, no, actually that makes sense. It makes sense that I lost my job because of that. It makes sense that I can't get a house because of that. Whatever.
It's essentially, you have if you tolerate that stuff in your life, it's like you turn your own private areas into the Nazi bar
Yes.
analogy.
Yeah, exactly. You got to punch the Nazi the minute the Nazi comes in, because otherwise you've become the Nazi bar.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that does seem to be the case. I've shifted far. They do say liberals always break right under pressure, but I think I was always leaning leftward anyway. And I've become a little bit less liberal in some respects, not in the sort of, I'm not in the growing more conservative way, that in more the, if you want a more equal society, a fairer society, a juster, more kind society, well, you can't always be nice about it. You are going to sometimes have to put your foot down and occasionally throw a punch. And which is not good if you kind of recognize that violence has a habit of escalating and getting out of control and all the rest of it.
And not
or
good if you
or
realize...
someone punches Richard Spencer and we never know who it was and they get away with it.
Well, that's it. Not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah, it's true.
It is a very, very individual take on the vampire myth. It's not quite like any approach to it I've read before, and pretty much everything you do when you are picking up a recognizable horror trope that I've seen from you, it's always takes it in a direction that I'd never anticipated before. So, I mean, did you set out with the idea of I'm going to write a vampire story, and it turned out this way? Or did you find it different? Or was it a different?
It was about it definitely did not start out with me planning a vampire story. It was kind of just, I had these odd scenes, these weird ideas with this character. I mean, it didn't even this very much like followed a weird trail from like some completely other story, and then I needed a backstory for a character, and then Kate Morning kind of came from that backstory, and then I was like, oh, I don't even want to do that other story now. I want to focus on this instead. And it was very much about Ivory, and then I probably via her vulnerability, although I didn't think of it that way at the time, it led into vampires. But Kate Morning and its secret twin Cape Shadow were kind of kind of the start of that point, and then that led into vampires.
One of the things I love about horror as a genre, and I don't think this is distinct to horror, but I do tend to see it more often, is the way that we filter our stories through ourselves, through our own experiences. And looking back on my stuff, for example, I see a mounting thing of neurodiversity and neurodiverse, main characters. And God knows I wasn't planning that. It was just like, I want to see myself reflected. I want to see me. And I think that a lot of people, particularly right now, are doing that. Would you agree?
I presume so. I mean, I'm not really kind of tabulating, I guess. I
Exactly.
assume that people are kind of writing stories that reflect their experiences.
Because that's how you get a good story, how you get a real, when you're playing in a sandbox, which is not realistic,
Right.
if you're starting from the position of, I'm going to tell you that dead people come back to life. I'm going to tell you that, then.
Well, and that's kind of where I look at it, is just like, because if you're bringing a genuine human element to the core of the story, then as far as I'm concerned, you can go as wild as you want with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Total agreement. And what I also love about our genre is the way that it refuses to hand wave the difficult elements of life. I think I've said before, and I'll say again probably a million times, that people do horrible things in the service of thinking that they're good people. That kind of illusion. And what I like about horror is that we tend to go like, no, nobody's good. So let's start off with that.
Well, that's the thing, because, again, to talk about that fascistic stuff, you have people who are like, this is what's normal. This is what's good. And if you are doing what I say because I'm a normal, good person, that means you are normal and good too. And it's like, life is so much more complicated than that. When you decide a person is good, then it's casting a label over all of their actions, and that's not how actions work. It's the other way around. You have to. This kind of goes back to the Worm and His Kings, about just like kind of the measures of healing and harm. And that's kind of where horror ends up looking at stuff. It's not trying to. I mean, it does sometimes. It depends on the author, but I think at its core, horror is not about that, because you can do horrible things saying that they're good. And a lot of people, who do horrible things think, I'm a good person, I'm a normal person. They rationalize, justify, whatever it takes, or they just genuinely believe it.
Really, that's the scariest thing.
Right. And that's part of the stuff with this book is, you have a character who genuinely does want to help and thinks that this is a good thing to do, and ends up, opening the door to something terrible. And I think that's part of what's scary to some people, is because they would rather do nothing than try to do something good, because of exactly this. And I don't think pretending like, no, trying is, no matter what you did, you were trying to do good. It's like, you should try to do things that help people, but don't pretend that's always going to work out right. You have no idea what's going to happen in the future. You have no idea what the consequences of things are. That doesn't mean have inaction. It just means that you can't predict things. That doesn't mean don't live your life. It doesn't mean don't help people.
No, I agree. There's this feeling, certainly from the right and to some degree from the centrists, that to be vulnerable, to be open, to open yourself to other people is always weakness. And weakness
It's inhuman to me.
Yeah.
It's not part of being not even just inhuman. It's not part of being a living creature.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
One of the things I've noticed about a lot of right-wing discourse for many, many years is not just the absence of empathy, but the rejection of empathy as a good thing. Of
Right.
people kind of like parading it as a kind of, I mean, in a way, I suppose, partly maybe has to do with a very warped idea of masculinity.
Definitely.
And
but it's also,
self-protection.
but it's also kind of tied up with ideas of political maturity. Of course, I'm going to, oh, you're naive, you're a bleeding heart, you're like crying over puppies, the equivalent of kind of thing. The people who pissed me off so much in recent years have actually been centrists, as they describe themselves, because as somebody who, as I was and am still an unrepentant supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, in Britain, who's I don't know how aware you guys are of him. He's basically like Britain's version of Bernie Sanders, except he got to lead our Progressive Party. And essentially, there was probably as much or as more effort. I mean, obviously, all the right-wing papers attacked him, all the right-wing politicians attacked him in the vilest and most extreme terms you can imagine, but he got almost as much from the centrists in the Labour Party, the moderates, who really seemed to like the idea of the Tories winning more than they did the idea of winning with the wrong kind of leader.
Well, that's because a lot of this is put on Twitter, but a lot of centrists are just right-wing people who don't want to lose their friends.
Yes. Or they're sort of, they're all in favor of a more just society, and university.
But don't do anything to try to make that a reality.
To readjust the status quo. It's like, no, but that, it's like readjusting the status quo. That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
And like it goes back to, again, what I was starting to say was just like people who would rather do nothing than try to do the right thing. Yeah. And you also have a bunch of people who will say, oh, that's right. Yeah, it's better to just do nothing than to try to do anything that would help anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate I'm all right, Jack, even when you're not all right and you fucking know you're not all right.
Because trying things is scary and sometimes you fail. And going back to what you're saying about, like, horror is, more willing to look in the face of a lot of this stuff. That's what this book is about, trying and failing. And I think we should look that in the face rather than pretend it doesn't happen or try to, write a moral. It's just like, look, if you try, it'll work out. It's like, no, sometimes it doesn't. You still need to try. You still have to try.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I do sometimes think that maybe the example of the things like the Russian and Chinese revolutions are there. It's like we had this, because all through the 20th century, we had this idea of an ideology of, we can see all these injustices in the system. Let's pull them down and replace it with something better. And you managed the first, but in terms of replacing it with something better, did you really?
Yeah, well, for me, the French Revolution as well.
It's hard to build. It's easier to destroy something than to build something or to heal something.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot easier to stack up heads and, sit underneath the guillotine, knitting and, singing than it is. Or kill everybody with glasses. You know.
Oh shit.
Oh God, we're all fucked.
We're all fucked.
All three of us.
It's also much easier to sit on the sidelines and shake your head over everything anyone does to try and improve anything. Rather than, because that way you're never wrong. Right.
It's kind of a like, well, yeah, this is a proposal to fix this problem. What about the 999 other problems? You don't have a solution to that, so might as well not bother.
The Nirvana fallacy, I think they call it. Nothing to do with the band. It's just we'll accept any solution that's not absolutely perfect. Oh, yeah. But
I think for some people that's not even a strategic thing. It's just a compulsion. Like that's just how their mindset is, and they have to kind of do work to get out of that. And a lot of people either don't want to, or don't have the resources to even recognize that, like, hey, this isn't healthy. It's not helping society, but it's also not helping you as a person.
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. We've been talking for, I think, about the last 10 minutes in purely political terms, but there's a huge, well, I mean, and that's interesting from the point of view of all those people on various review sites who are like, why is there so much politics in everything? It's like I wanted a vampire novel, and I with some particular lashings of various things that I like, but and then I got all these politics, and half the time.
I mean, I think the only people who are going to look at it that way are people who really don't want to see the trans characters in the first place, and that's in your face by page 2.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not going to get that far to be an issue. I honestly, I think people can read this. They'll read different things into this book, and they'll read it the way they want to.
Yeah.
I
mean,
it is still just
existing.
It is still that vampire story. If you're somebody who only is reading things on a surface level, you're not going to feel interrupted by, themes and such. It still has to be a story, and it still is characters, and that's what's most important to me. Theme is the stuff that comes later. There's concepts and characters and what they do, and that's the stuff that's most interesting to me, because that's the part that is most human. I feel it's the thematic stuff is the child of the rest of it. A lot of times the theme isn't clear until halfway through writing, or perhaps not until afterward, perhaps not until a time has passed afterward, and looking at editing is like, oh, I did that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think that the deeper element of this story is just that I didn't mean to get as personal. I didn't mean to dig up as many skeletons. But as I was at an event for Rachel Harrison's vampire book that just came out, So Thirsty, and she and I were in conversation for that. And one of the things we talked about is that you don't always realize you're doing that you're getting your own stuff in there. But once you do, to omit it would be insincere. It does. If you tried to cut that out once it's naturally flowed into the story, then it's not that story anymore, and it will always feel like you amputated something important from it.
Like cutting off the blood supply.
Total agreement there. And it is to cut off the blood supply. It's like it becomes dead.
That's how appropriate that simile was, so I said it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also gonna, where I was going with the whole, so much politics thing is that I actually think what drives horror is emotion. And, that people don't sit down with like a list of shit. It's like, I got to name
a couple people do.
Yeah,
a couple people do, but for the most part, I do agree. Horror and romance are the big emotion genres, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and the intersection of horror and romance is sensation literature in a lot of ways, which I think is where everything comes from. Sensation, which was always seen as like a lesser genre, a female genre. Even when guys were writing it, this weird idea of like, stop trying to make me feel things, man. Stop it. You're making me feel weird.
Decrease the fucking thing.
Yeah, I never really understood. Like, there's that. And that we have a lot of that today. I think with just kind of this desire for things to just be, from some parties, very simple. Window pane prose. Don't have just the facts, facts. Don't give me feeling, atmosphere, etc. Right. And I'm just like, well, what good is that in art?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to be coming home on the subway, reading the end of a book and crying over it.
In
a way that makes people look at me.
That was me.
Which I've done at least once.
Oh yeah, that was me on the bus. The second time I finished 11/22/63 by Stephen King, and that's again the second time. I already knew how the book ended,
Right.
and I was still sitting there with my Kindle reading it and crying on the bus.
Yeah.
I remember bursting into tears at the end of when I read the end of one novel. But luckily, I was alone. I was alone in a room at the time. I don't know if it was Instruments of Night by Thomas H. Cook. The last couple of chapters of that deliver. It's sort of like a 1, 2, 3 of a gut punch kind of thing, and you're just left reeling by the end of it. And the end kind of just when you think the ending is going to take you to the darkest place, it's taking you to the darkest place imaginable. The very end kind of does something different, and it's just I'm a great admirer of many of his stuff, but I have that best of it. Back to the topic. Going back to what you said about sort of somebody who tries to change things and ends up unintended consequences and so on. I mean, one of the things I loved Ivory as a character, and she did not things with her. I mean, she did not go in the direction that I thought she was going to go in the story, which I love.
Same. I didn't know she was going to go in the direction she went either.
I was going to ask about that.
Took over.
Yes.
It's a really extraordinary journey, and it's a journey you wouldn't normally a character like that. You wouldn't normally expect that character to be the central character, or the character that you feel so much sympathy for, because there was a point where it's actually, I'm not sure if I'm still not kind of on her side here, and thought it's like, okay, I think maybe this has got a bit out of hand, I've.
The ultimate horror comment. Yeah, I think this is maybe going in some directions I might not have wanted it. Oh Lord, okay.
And that just happened completely unexpectedly for you.
I'm sorry.
And that just happened completely unexpectedly for you.
Somewhat, like, I didn't expect her to go where she went exactly. But as you're getting into a direction, like, inklings start occurring. It's like, hey, wait a second, is this what we're doing?
Yeah, you feel that. I love the fact as well that you build a whole story around this core of trans main characters who, like, the only trans kids in town almost. Ivory and Cabrina and Z and Rex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my brain just went blank there for a second. But it's astonishing how much of a character Cabrina manages to be, even though she's spending most of the story dead.
Being dead doesn't remove you from life in a weird way.
No, especially not in a story like this.
Especially. Yeah, but also, even if she wasn't what she is in the book, there's still the diary, the diary entries throughout.
And talking of people who do
the diary
evil things while convinced they're right, Viola fucking Bright.
Yeah, she's not the type of character I would typically write, because, like, how do I put this? I want to write queer characters in my books, and trans characters among them, but I typically don't have them confronting bigoted characters or outwardly bigoted characters, because I'm just like, I feel like that's such a, I don't know, no, I don't want to say typical, but it kind of becomes that way sometimes. I think that's just that's the first thing you might think of. And also because for a cis audience, there's kind of this providing of how do I put it, discrimination tourism.
Yes.
So and there is a lot of pressure from publishing to cater to that. So typically, Worm and His Kings, No Gods for Drowning, Cranberry Cove, these are trans characters who don't have to deal with that for the most part. Like, there's a little bit in Monique's backstory, but in the book itself, in the present book of The Worm and His Kings, she does not face transphobic characters. Typically, the Queen of Teeth, as oppressive as things are in that, I just didn't have Yaya and Doc dealing with people who were going to have problems with them being lesbians, just as being humans that aren't corporate property.
Exactly.
They had 99 problems, but bigotry wasn't one.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
That's actually a perfect way of putting it, because that's how I end up kind of approaching it. It's like, there's other horror to explore. There's other things to. This book is an exception. This one is the one where it's like, because I trust other trans authors to handle that stuff, like Alison Brumfitt, Gretchen Felker Martin, and so on. I don't need to be doing that as well. But this was a situation where, because of the stuff that was coming out, it just pooled out. There was a lot of just things that weren't decisions so much as instincts that I couldn't really deny while writing. So this one's the exception.
I think, when you're doing that small town thing where you're doing that, that sort of, God, what would I call it? It's kind of like a domestic lament configuration where, it's, the smaller things get, the more obvious it is that it's a system that's designed to break you down. And, at that point, you can't just go, well, that exists, but, it exists everywhere. So why fucking talk about it?
And that's I think it's a really good point, because I'm thinking of other books of mine where it's like they take place in cities, and obviously there are problems, but it's just, you're not going to have that kind of situation. Like, how many people know their town council, versus this situation where it's like, that's Cabrina's mom. Like, the politics are embedded in her life, and if that weren't bad enough, her dad is a cop. So
I mean, you often hear the story of people who flee like a prejudiced small town upbringing to go to the city because they can lose themselves there because the scale is so big.
Right. It's not that the city is like a paradise or something. No. It's just different problems, and sometimes there's a lot of like, the devil, but sometimes it's like, what, take a chance.
Take a chance on the devil you don't, which is kind of like what you have to do every time if you ever try to want to take action that will change things, because you don't know everything that's going to happen. But I mean, with Viola, I mean, she's not like some raging goose stepping trumper like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
No, that would have been too simple, I felt.
She genuinely thinks I don't have any problem with trans people, but my son is definitely not one.
Yeah.
It's a she.
And we've heard this story, so many times, where it's like, I am a good liberal person. I'm a good centrist person, but when it actually touches me.
Yeah. And that's the thing with her. I kind of wanted a character that some people, depending on their perspective, could almost relate to.
Yeah.
Especially when getting into her one POV chapter later in the book, that they could almost feel this. And it's like, that is where you have to be most mindful.
Yes.
Yeah. I almost had a bit of, when we first met her at the graveside, a part of me almost sympathized her, because I thought she was just, she wasn't deliberately trying to be cruel to her child. She genuinely thought she was doing the best, and she just didn't. And it's kind of like, she just doesn't get it. And then you realize later on that it's not, that she was being a lot more, maybe a bit more
like deliberate.
Well, and a lot of that you don't even see through the other characters, the living characters' POVs. You see it through Cabrina's diary, just how far this goes.
Yeah.
It really brought home to me just how painful that kind of thing must be. And as someone who obviously, I support trans rights, but obviously it's not a struggle. Being trans is not something I've gone through myself, and it's there are aspects of that experience that I can never know through first-hand experience. But this did. I mean, this brought home things to me that just hadn't crossed my mind before. Aspects of just how awful that kind of thing is, and what is extra. I mean, one real, because I mean, in a way, Cabrina and Ivory, their journeys kind of are in a kind of parallel one.
Yeah.
away. And one of the things that really struck me, one of the big differences between them, is despite everything she undergoes, despite being deprived of understanding and support in in a place where she should expect to get that, Cabrina is still not only is she still loved by Z, she's loved by Rex, but she also loves. She doesn't lose that ability. And Ivory isn't loved. She's the one relationship she's in is with Wolf, which is basically fetishistic, and he's fine with anything else as long as she doesn't become too inconvenient or needy. And in terms of love, well, there's more anger, understandably. There's a lot to be pissed off at, but I don't know, it's not so much a love story as a story about love and about what happens.
Yeah.
And I think that in a weird way, a lot of vampire stories are stories about love.
I definitely agree. They and whether they present themselves as love stories or not, sometimes that is just kind of the glamour of the vampire, when it is just kind of a dissection of love.
Yeah, I mean, it's baked in, and most recently, I guess we see it in the amazing AMC adaptation of Interview with the Vampire, where you're like,
so good.
Oh my God, yes. And it's like, yeah, it's not how can you love this terrible person? It's how can two terrible people love each other? Three really love each other. And yet it doesn't help. It doesn't help.
Right. Because the capacity for love is not what's the problem, but because people, I think if you feel lonely, if you feel isolated, then again, you are more vulnerable to someone taking advantage of you, and that can feel like love. It can even be love that is just a messed up love. Like it does, like we're kind of instructed to view like abuse as being a separate thing from love. And that is true conceptually. They are separate things, but an abuser can still love you. And that's what messes a lot of people up, because they are not expressing it right. But the thing is that love is a feeling. It's a thing in your brain. It's in your nervous system, and they can still feel that, and just, it comes out awful. And trying to pretend that doesn't happen sometimes is, I think, why some abuse victims get stuck in things, because they feel this, where it's just like, I know this person loves me, therefore they can't be abusing me.
Exactly.
It's like, no, it can be both can happen.
And also that thing of loving someone else and expecting that to fix you without loving yourself is really difficult. And the interesting transition that I think Louis Dupont-de-Lac goes through over the first two seasons is to get to a place where he can accept the bad things that he's done and the bad parts of himself, and still be like, but that's me, and I have a right to accept myself and say, and now I'm going to do better.
I did like the character,
which is really difficult.
Really difficult. It's like, wow, I really fucking let Claudia down. Holy shit.
Son.
It wasn't just everybody else. It was me. I let her down from beginning to end. But
I did like the character. I mean, it's kind of an interlude in Cabrina's diary of the cinnamon-scented man, this guy she meets who is quite accepting, and she's attracted to him, and there's an implication that he's attracted to her, but he breaks it off because it's like, you know what, this wouldn't be healthy. This would not.
Right. He's significantly older than her. And he does the right thing, but she's a teenager, and it's hard. If your heart's broken, that feels like the end of the world.
It's the right thing, but it's still very hard on her. Sometimes there just is no good option.
Right.
in those
Well,
circumstances.
that's something I feel horror is also very good at exploring, is when there is no good option.
Yes.
Yeah, just like which awful thing do I do, kind of thing. Which awful thing is going to happen?
The awful thing that's best for everybody, or the awful thing that I enjoy the most? The awful thing that, helps me or seems to help.
And that can't necessarily be left to everybody, because again, she's a young girl in an abusive household.
Yeah.
That's not, as we see from her friends' point of view, is not going to lead her towards the best decisions all the time. And they do their best to help her, but they're just kids too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and so much is about modeling. So much of experience is about modeling, but so much is also about having enough experience to be able to go, oh, okay, yeah, I remember this. This doesn't actually go anywhere good. Yeah. And it takes I'm going to sound super old here. Sometimes when I see these kids today online, I'm sort of like, no, dude, you have to let yourself have bad experiences.
Yeah.
Right.
Because otherwise you're not going to understand what a good experience is.
Right.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to tell you this. You got to get yourself out there, have some bad sex, have some bad relationships. It's like.
And the thing is, if you don't do it when you're young, you're just going to do it when you're older, and there's like heavier consequences.
Oh, super.
Yeah.
Super
I definitely wish I'd done more in that vein when I was younger. I would have. There were lessons that I didn't learn until later in life. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
A lot of it to do with there's a huge difference between sex and love. I grew up with this very romantic idea that sort of sex and love went together. You get. I mean, I had my parents are still married after 50, 60 years. Yeah, I mean they are so when you have, and most of the people in my immediate social circle when I was a kid, I mean I was from a fairly privileged middle class background, but you'd see people in what, as far as I'm aware, I mean I'm sure there's probably a few cases where there was all sorts of dreadful stuff going on behind the scenes, but to the best of the knowledge, for me and a lot of the people I was friends with growing up, they had parents with solid marriages, loving relationships, pretty politically conservative, of course, because that's the area. So if I'd come out as gay or bi or whatever, then I don't know. I'm not quite. That might have been a bit of a rockier time for me. So I'm aware of the limitations there. But I always grew up with that idea that the two went together, and it took an awful lot of banging my head against the brick wall of reality, and then finally getting laid uncomplicatedly, sort of in the early 2010s for us. Oh, right, they are separate things, and you can have one without the other. And right, okay, feel a lot better now.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah, about a year later, I met my wife.
I mean, similarly, I didn't have sex till I was 20, and I remember feeling really bad about the fact that I didn't love that person. It's like I didn't even like that person.
Look, that's how it goes sometimes.
It does. Yeah, that is. That is absolutely how it goes. And to some degree, that's how it kind of has to go.
And there's always
right. You learn about yourself through things like that. And it's just like, I will, not to get into my own stuff, but just like, I will not make that decision next time I'm bored.
Yes.
Like that's not a reason to do certain things.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And again, when you're talking about characters who are young, and particularly when you're talking about someone like Cabrina, the thing which is inherent in that Twin Peaks narrative of, but any one of these decisions could get you killed.
Right.
Any one of these decisions could end up with you getting killed, and then you're dead.
And there's no easy answer. I always kind of think of those nature films where you see like all the little baby turtles hatching out and
Yeah.
swimming down the beach to the sea, and it's kind of like running the gauntlet of all these awful things that can happen to you with crabs and seabirds and shit. And if you're lucky, you eat the water.
That's why they. Oh, can it not be shown? That's why they're on my forearm.
Nice.
Love it.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's tough. And of course, the other thing, of course, I mean, there is that old joke about teenagers. Are you tired of being ordered around by your parents? Move out now while you still know everything. There is that thing. You often see younger people, and you think, I know what I've been that way. I've done those things, and I know that you're just going to waste time and energy doing stuff that will not get you anywhere. But at the same time, you remember what you were like at that age and how, if someone had told you, you probably wouldn't have listened.
Right. And also probably shouldn't listen, to be honest. You should do stupid things when you're young. It's just how it is. It's because that's part of developing as a person, is making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many
even
times,
though it's dangerous, it's the same goes right back to what we were talking about earlier about trying to do the right thing, trying to help people.
Yes.
You have to try. It's part of life. There's no such thing as a perfect life.
Yeah, exactly. And it always ends the same way. So to some degree.
Well, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe a couple of the characters.
To some degree, when it's framed like, well, but that could get you killed. Yeah, well,
everything. Eventually, something's going to kill you.
Yeah, eventually something will get me killed. So, I might as well get killed following to some degree my own heart. So all of these things are weirdly integral to not just horror, but also to the vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of you. I'm always tempted to ask, but I'm also kind of scared of finding out how much of you there might be in Ivory Sloane. If too much, should I sort of start making human sacrifices to you now? Maybe.
There's some of me in every character I write. From the best ones to the worst ones, there's something of me in there. I to be honest, I know probably some other writers are gonna like raise their eyebrow or whatever, but I never understand the whole thing where it's like, I'm gonna write this person made me mad today, I'm gonna write them into a horror story and get rid of them. It's like, yeah, but to write them genuinely, you're gonna have to put a little of yourself in there too. Like you're gonna actually have to, they were an asshole. Now you have to step into their perspective and see why they were that way, and it just makes it a little harder. I know. What's his name? What do I call him? Helvanite, the character, the guy who's in like 2 chapters in the book. That's based on somebody who, like, that really happened. The thing that makes him get Ivory and Honey's attention.
Oh yes.
And I, but in writing him, I couldn't just make him one-dimensional. So he has that moment where he's like, well, my friend, I shouldn't ditch my friends. Like you have to explore that stuff, or otherwise you're just writing cardboard cutouts.
Yeah, exactly.
I will admit I've written some characters who are just utterly horrible. And even when I put myself inside their heads, they still remain utterly horrible. I need to work on that, I think.
Well,
I just can't do it because they have to live in my head at that point, and I have to see more of them than just that moment that pissed me off.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, David Gemmell, among fantasy authors, I always thought was very good at that. He could take characters who you really thought were going to be dreadful, and he would put something in their point of view, and you'd end up. I think he said at one point his wife said, "You can never write a character who's completely evil. You can never do it." She said, "I will. I'm going to write this character who's completely without a redeeming feature," and it became this character called Anticus Carios, who is anything but. Who's actually one of his is very complex and ultimately character you do. I think he actually in one of his books he actually created a race of monsters called the Daroth. The Daroth. They were like completely inhuman. And he still managed to find. I think he just wanted to make some. Okay, I'm going to write a complete species that are totally shit. No, even they haven't turned out to be completely horrible either.
Well,
God damn it.
Yeah, this is the thing about perspective. This is the thing,
Yeah.
Perspective breeds empathy.
Yes, and empathy is one of the pillars of my writing, as far as I'm concerned, along with just weirdness, queerness, and I always can't. I can never remember the last one. I said it on a podcast like 2 years ago, and then it just kind of left me. And it's like, what was the fourth one?
Empathy, weirdness, queerness,
And
something, maybe the mystery. I don't know.
Shunting.
No.
I did actually. I actually rewatched Society for the first time since I saw it years ago. I got my partner. It's like I was saying this in the interview with Nadia Bolkin as well. I think my other half had sort of all she was aware of was I think she had seen some pictures of the kind of body horror.
You showed it to her. You showed her that.
I think she's seen a couple of pictures of it. It was kind of
okay. Let me put it this way: I wouldn't show Society to my wife because I don't want her to be mad at me.
I think she was a bit cross with me, but she did admit that it was actually a good. It was a similar problem she had with Deliverance, because all she'd heard about Deliverance was, of course, the mixed squeal like a pig. So she basically thought we're going to get 2 hours of non-stop, Ned Beatty being forcibly buggered on the screen, and obviously that is not what you get when you watch Deliverance. Sorry to disappoint anyone out there who hasn't seen it and was hoping that was what you would get. But likewise, Society is not like an hour and a half of non-stop shunting.
I mean, I will say, I think on some level that would probably make it a very interesting movie.
Yes. Yeah,
but
you could write that movie.
But I do. There's never going to be anything like the shunting scene. Like that was a product of its time and a product of Screaming Mad George, and it's just nothing like that will ever happen again.
I think a couple of the sequences in Possessor come close, particularly the sequence where she's looking down and seeing this guy's dick, essentially.
I guess I feel maybe I guess the way I'm looking at between the practical effects, the situational element of it, like this being the culmination of what's going on in the movie, also the perverse dark glee that is going on in that scene, because the movie is reveling in it. Like is not. It already knows you're going to be horrified by what you're seeing, so it's just having a blast. Like the tone is almost a carnival. Mm-hmm. Like the movie's tone is joyous. Like the character's afraid, you're like about it, but the movie so the movie doesn't need to sell it more, because that would be too much probably. So it goes in the opposite direction. It's like, isn't this a great time? And I think that's part of what makes that scene so uniquely fascinating.
Thank God I could just I can just let my freak flag.
Right. That's like it's just like the creatures are like, oh, we can relax from our horrible human shaped existence and just be slime and tubes and whatever else, and melt into each other in this and digest. Right, it's digestion, it's sex, it's a sigh after you've been holding your breath all at once, and it's just like, so I'm just like, how could anything else capture all of this? Like there's never going to be anything like this scene again.
It is extraordinary. I did love, I think, somebody on Twitter saying Society is on Shudder, you need to watch it, and then you will have 50% more of what Hailey Piper is saying.
That's I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I put it up because it is a commentary on whatever I'm quote tweeting with it. Sometimes I put it up just because that'd be a funny thing to respond with, as far as whatever the prompt is, because like there was one where it was like the Tory meeting, the Tory convention or whatever, and like people were doing different pictures, and I just popped that up as like the Tory convention. Other stuff is just like nice, other stuff will be more innocuous, where not something as basic as this, but something in the line of like your favorite scene in a movie, and just put up the shunting. And
obviously.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's true. Like, that's the funny thing, because people will be like, this must be your favorite movie. And I'm like, no, it's like, well, one of your top 5 is like not even top 50. I just find that scene fascinating, and I think everyone should watch Society at least once.
Yeah. The beautiful cartoon.
Except my wife.
Yeah, exactly. Because no. Listen, if I had $1 for every time I have not exactly forced Steve to be in the same room as I'm watching something, but I know that he's just sort of like, I'm disengaging from this.
She likes horror, but she does not like that period of late 80s practical effects where it's just a little too goopy. Like, she does not like Evil Dead 2.
Wow.
There's something else from that period that she really doesn't like, and it's just too, it turns the human body into Play-Doh, and that really bothers her.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Blob. I'll bet.
Oh, she doesn't even know about that. She doesn't even know about the remake.
I'm guessing Bride of the Reanimator would not be her cup of tea either.
So what was that one?
Bride of Reanimator.
No, but she's been fascinated about Reanimator, and there's a part of her that kind of wants to watch it. I have not pushed it, but I do think that one's a little less of that kind of stuff than others. So she may watch Reanimator at some point. I have not seen Bride of Reanimator myself, so I'll have to see. I have to screen this stuff first.
Amazing.
It is.
It's like morbid doodling with body parts.
Kind of.
I mean, I'm gonna watch it. It's on my list. I just haven't. Maybe if Shudder adds it, then I can make that easier.
I think it's on Tubi. Tubi. Okay. If you've got that.
Yeah,
I know that both of them were up on Tubi
everybody
for
has
quite a
Tubi,
while.
I think.
Yeah, I think so. Both of them were up on Tubi for quite a while, and it was the good versions from Arrow. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. The versions that I have.
Bride of Reanimator, definitely. It's kind of like they tried to do. I felt they were trying to do like 2 or maybe 3 sequels at once. Like they had 2 or 3 different ideas for a sequel.
Yep.
And tried to put them all together. And I've kind of loved to see each one of those films in its own right. But the climax of that film is like batshit crazy.
It is also the difference between Gordon and Yasna as well.
Okay.
Yeah. The same director as Society, and I'm pretty sure Screaming Mad George did the effects for that as the Bride as well.
Yes, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Anyway.
When you've got effects by somebody called Screaming Mad George, that is a pretty good, kind of like.
Oh yeah, definitely. You could have just slapped his name on there and just be like, effects by Screaming Mad George. It's like, oh, like I see. That's why. What was I saying last year? I was like, I like when there's an opening credits. It says creature effects by. It's like, because then you're going to get to see a creature.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's just nice. It's nice to see creatures. I mean, heck, that's why I put them in most of my books. There's a monster or some kind of weird creature. Even this one, I was like, I can't just have them be human-looking vampires. So they start revealing a bit more of themselves in the last stretch of the book.
Yeah.
Horny lesbian hyena women,
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Sign me up. So I mean, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the other thing I did wonder, because I mean, while the story with those characters seems to have pretty much reached a conclusion, there are certain things that have happened during the course of the novel which have kind of like are still rippling out there, and I don't know if you've any plans to return to that, or if you just want to let the readers kind of imagine what the world's going to look like afterwards.
At the moment, I'm content to let the reader imagine, but there is potential there for other stuff, both because of the ramifications and also because of the nature of Cape Shadow. Like even my editor was like, so what's behind those other doors? And I was like, we didn't do that in this story. But so I have notes. I don't know if I'll do this, but
what's this?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, it is kind of like that. It's just a messed up Nightmare Before Christmas. But I have notes. I don't know if I'm going to do this, but I have notes for like a prequel that I think would explore some other stuff. But I don't know if I'm going to write that because I've tried to write a prequel to The Worm and His Kings, and that fell apart completely. Obviously that's a very different scale. But I was thinking like, hey, what if, somebody, it didn't obviously end with the same result, but what if somebody else had been to Cape Shadow maybe in the 80s or something? And so we'll see how, we'll see how the book does. We'll see, but like Titan has been interested in like, there's a lot of space to explore with Cape Shadow.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, it's definitely open. But the funny thing is like, part of those discussions sometimes been like when I've written something else that has like this like other world to it, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. I just like writing those. Ever since I saw Hellraiser when I was like 12 or 13,
and then Hellbound came out.
Yeah, it's just the idea of our reality being paper thin. Like stuck with me ever since. Like that was a huge influence on not just my appreciation of horror, but my imagination is just like, it's like, just like there could be messed up Narnias everywhere.
Yes. Yes.
And so I just end up writing those a lot because I'm like, yeah, I don't think people should be too comfortable that all this is too solid.
No, I mean, physics alone will tell you that.
Oh yeah, totally. That's one of those things that's like people have said like Worm and His Kings made me feel really confused. It's like that's because there's physics in it, and physics is weird because essentially the entire universe is held together by rubber bands made of sound and gravity.
Yeah, and to some degree by perspective.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
I just refuse to see that. I just refuse to.
No, totally. Because that's one of those things. It's just like, and this is something that's going into the book I'm working on right now, is just this idea that, and I think I first encountered this reading the book version of 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. But it's just like, yeah, these are 3 dimensions, but there can be more. And it's like, and I had already encountered that with like the time machine. It's like, oh, you mean like time? It's like, no, like physically there can be another side to this, the way that we like will geometrically look at something as having like 3 sides. It's like, well, what if it has a 4th physical side that we just can't perceive of? And then you get into like flatland stuff where it's like on the paper. Yeah. As far as the people, like you draw these stick figures, as far as the people on the paper are concerned, that the world is 2 dimensions. And if you like you poke your pen through the paper, they don't see a pen, they just see that circle. I'm like, well, how many parts of our world are physical things in a 4th or 5th or whatever dimension? Yeah. And we just notice them as the wind or emotions or whatever else. And like the reason you feel awful is because that's the part you can understand of this creature moving through your life on a dimension we can't even fully perceive.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of,
and that's when people tell me to shut up.
we don't want you to shut up. We love talking about this stuff.
Exactly.
The Worm and His Kings, because as I said earlier on, since we last spoke to you, I mean, I think you'd already you'd already finished the Even the Worm Will Turn, and we're working on Song of the Tyrant Worm, or maybe.
Yeah, probably. I mean, since then, I think I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books, 6 books out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been Even the Worm Will Turn, Cruel Angels Past Sundown, A Light Most Hateful, Cranberry Cove, Song of the Tyrant Worm, Ghostlands and Alley Glasgow, and now All the Hearts You Eat will be out as of this recording.
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, with Donna, with the song with Even the Worm Will Turn and Song of the Tyrant Worm, because I think you said the last time we spoke that that the lore that kind of underlies the whole thing, the Pangeans, the worm, the breaking of the world, that was what your starting point.
Yes, yes.
Worm and his Kings, and
I needed to figure out how to who can approach this. And I started that as a short story, and it didn't work. And then I wrote the novella once I had a character who made sense to have a reason to be discovering this stuff, and it coming to the audience or the readers.
Yeah. So the sequels gave you a chance to explore the lore a bit more.
Yeah.
So even the Worm Will Turn focuses on Donna Ashton when he still have 4 years after even the Worm Will Turn. The Worm and His Kings, rather, and the Song of the Tyrant Worm focuses on the Grey Maiden, which are both really interesting choices to make. So how did you come to sort of decide on telling the stories with those 2 characters?
Well, firstly, with the second book, instead of writing a sequel, at first I tried to write a prequel, and that had a different main character, but it just didn't work. It was one of the situations where it's like, I like, oh, this is a lot of pretty writing. It's not doing anything though. And then after that, yeah, I know. So after that, I was like, who's an interesting character is Donna. So, and I don't think some people like that choice. I think they were just like, really, we got to sit through a book of Donna. I hate Donna. But I'm like, I think that's what makes that important, because I do think you should see what her perspective is and why she is the way she is. And very importantly, how anyone can choose to be better. Anyone can choose not to make the same decisions as they do. And Donna has that option more than anyone because of what happens in what is revealed in the middle of that book.
Yes.
But so that was kind of where it just made sense with Song of the Tyrant Worm. Again, there was kind of a proto draft that went in a very different direction. It just didn't work. I hated it. And I was just like, I kind of just was looking at the Grey Maiden. I was trying to explore her from the outside, but it was just like, it didn't work. It's like, just explore from the inside. There's no reason she can't be the point of view book. I'm on the 3rd book in this series. I don't have to stick with a human protagonist.
Yeah.
Did that create were there any extra challenges to that? Because obviously you're putting yourself in the head of a character who isn't human at all. Although she has.
Honestly, I should say that was difficult, but it wasn't. I feel like, because when I was younger and watching horror movies, a lot of the times, if it was a monster movie, I often identified with the monster, and I don't think that's an uncommon experience. But so I was like, but a lot of also outside of watching movies, part of that identifying was because I just felt outside of most social situations. I felt like I didn't understand how a lot of things worked. And I just was like, well, Grey Maiden is kind of in a similar state. She's raised by humans, but she isn't human, and she doesn't understand how a lot of this stuff functions or why a lot of this stuff is. But she's been given she's been taught enough to understand people. She's been taught, signs so that she can talk with the one human who seemed to genuinely care about her, but passed away because the worm's machinations are, very much dwarf a human lifespan.
Yeah.
And I think the main challenge was figuring out how she was going to interact with other characters. And that's where Zoe and Charlotte came in, who were kind of refugees from another story I was working on that kind of fell apart. And it made sense for them to be refugees from their own time period because of the consequences of the first book, essentially.
Yeah.
And the second book, really, you discover later on. So I think the main challenge was that stuff, the interaction. But as far as her perspective when she's by herself, that stuff came probably easier than it should have.
That's the best stuff.
Right, and that's the thing. I was like, again, it's the third book in a series. Like, what do I have to lose by asking people to step into the talons of a 10 to 12 foot tall bird lady?
Yeah.
They've got through they've got through everything else up to this point, so they'll.
Right, that's a good point. Look, you've had to go underground with Monique. You've had to discover all this weird cosmic stuff, and how like the history was changed like 175 million years ago, and how like how cosmic gods end up functioning, and all this weird stuff in the second book, and the science facility and everything. If you can get through all that, but you are kind of like, you're probably not going to stop as like, what a bird lady, I'm out.
Yeah, no, this is the thing. I mean, I think it's, and again, I think it's a perfectly fine, perfectly cromulent challenge to ask people to overcome a little difficulty.
Yeah.
And
I'm not even sure how much it's asking for. I mean, a lot of the stories we start with when we're younger, I mean, they're not treated like they are. They're treated like they're humans in animal shapes, but anthropomorphic, animals are a lot of our earlier stories when we're children.
Mm-hmm.
People have watched freaking Wall-E and read books where it's from like a dog's perspective, and I'm just like, I don't think it's a huge ask, especially because humans have such capacity for empathy. Mm-hmm. I always think back to the first episode of Community, where Jeff picks up a pencil, and to demonstrate this, picks up a pencil, and it's like, everyone, this is Steve. Say hi to Steve. And everybody's like, hi, Steve. And then he snaps the pencil in half, and like they gasp.
Yeah.
And go, like, I think one of the characters will see you. Right. And it's just like, because we can empathize with anything. And I think probably what's asking more of people, as far as with the Gray Maiden, is less that she's not a human, and more the fact that from the beginning she is abducting women off the street, and knowing that they're going to be killed because the cult that raised her has promised her that she will have a better future if she just does this one thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And and again, this brings us back to the whole thing of empathy being the challenge, but also empathy being the horror.
Yeah.
Because, we are all capable of doing dreadful things, especially if we think it's the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah. Or just honestly, like, just the loneliness. If there's an offer of a cure for loneliness, that's a very tempting thing to grasp, because even when you are loved, that still happens. And it's just, and in her case, like, she is isolated. Like, I feel a lot of my protagonists, show isolation. Yaya in Queen of Teeth, and Monique, once she's separated from Donna in the first Worminous Kings, definitely All the Hearts You Eat with Ivory. And Cabrina, even though Cabrina is loved by her friends, she still feels and is, forcibly at times isolated.
Yes.
And so it's very difficult to turn away from some otherworldly force that's saying, like, I can make it all better.
Yeah, that's what religion offers. That's what fascism offers.
Right. Yeah. Right. And in the Gray Maiden's case, it is literally it is this religion that is formed partly because of her existence. Her existence makes them their faith, like, confirms their faith in the worms. Like, see,
she's the living proof.
She can't, if she exists, therefore the worm exists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So she's Jesus, basically.
She's something. She is a miracle. She is a living miracle, essentially, and that's what ticks her at first to Charlotte, where Charlotte calls her that in ASL, and it's just like, that's the first time that she's been referred to like that outside of a religious context, just for being herself.
Yeah.
And that starts the kind of road to be like, this doesn't have to be the only path. Like, these are people, like, she didn't even know that anyone besides the woman who raised her and herself could speak in sign. And so once she encounters two humans who can speak in sign, it's just like, wait a second, there are other options.
That's the other way she's like Jesus, of course, is because people can interpret her however they want, because all she can say is, ooh, ooh.
Right, because she can't speak to them. So they are just like, Lady is definitely like the key person doing that. It's just like she's constantly projecting onto her.
Yeah, she gets good. I like the fact that she got done in not once but twice over the course of the trilogy.
I mean, I think most of the characters die at least once, if not twice, just because of the circumstances.
I've got to admit, when I first tried to read Even the Worm Will Turn, I struggled because it had been a while since I'd read The Worm and His Kings, and it was kind of like trying to remember everything.
I kind of just throw you. It's like, it's been 4 years. Let's get on with it. It does kind of bits and pieces, goes over stuff as Donna is kind of reflecting on things, but it's never just like, last time on The Worm and His King.
I just waited till Song of the Tyrant Worm came out and then got it all up and just reread from the beginning.
And a lot of people did do that. Like they bought Even the Worm Will Turn, but they were like, I'm just going to wait for the third one just so I can kind of reread the first and then read the second and the third all in one go. And that totally makes sense to me.
For the whole ride.
But I do think the third book is probably easier to slide into after a period of time, just because it kind of is like resetting a few things and like establishing them from a different character's perspective. I think up to the halfway point, in fact, you could probably read the third book without having read the first two. It's just once you get to the middle of the book, though, then it's like, okay, everything that happened in the first two books comes crashing in, and you kind of need to at least have some idea. Otherwise, it's going to seem very random.
Yeah. Who the fuck are these people? What?
Right.
I've always admired so much about your work from the very first thing when I first read The Worm and His Kings is how you're able to tell a story. And that's a much maligned term because people often mean it's some like walking talent failure like Dan Brown. It's not. Being able to tell a good story well, that involves that's like character and mood and all the rest of it. And what astonished me so much about The Worm and His Kings is you're weaving in these. So all the different settings, from the people living in the tunnel through to the Sunless Palace and everything. Any one of those could be worth a book in itself. And then you've got Monique, you've got Monique and Don and their backstories. It always reminds me of Chomsky's thing about how if your opinion is too far outside the mainstream, then it's a struggle if they invite you onto TV to talk about it because you've got to. The people are looking for quick 1 or 2 minute sound bites, and you need to spend at least twice as much time explaining why so many of their where you don't agree with so many of their preconceptions about it. So you've got to kind of. It's always that. So it's always difficult when you've got a character who's not the default in that sense. So you've got all of that, and you've got the lore, and all of this, and yet all of this is there in the book, and at the same time, the pace doesn't let up for a moment. You never lose track of the story, the chase through the tunnels, and the trying to infiltrate the cult and finding herself in this. And that
was partly intentional. I didn't want to linger because it was set out to be a novella, and it is. So my thought process was there should be something new each chapter. So there should be either a new concept or a new location. A lot of times those ended up going hand in hand. As far as I can recall, like the only like repetitions are really when she's coming back to the Sunless Palace near the end. But that's kind of one of those reaches like, okay, like I didn't want the reader to get too comfortable with any of these locations. And the longer you spend in a location, the more you get a little settled in. It's like, okay, just enough to get some stuff into you, just enough for Monique to learn something she needs, and just enough to maybe bother you a little bit. And like, okay, now we're moving on to the next thing. Like I didn't want the chapters to sit in those places too long. I wanted to keep it moving.
Yeah, and that certainly happened, and it worked beautifully. And you work it very well at longer length as well, like with No Gods for Drowning. Is there any news on that coming back into print, by the way?
Not yet, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know where that is. The good thing is that the audiobook is still out from Dreamscape. So
That's right.
people who are open or like to listen to books, it's narrated wonderfully. But yeah, as far as print and ebook, yeah, no progress on that front yet, unfortunately. I would love to find a new home for it. Just gotta get there.
I hope you do. Obviously, hoping you revisit the world of Aeon as well.
Yeah, it's well, there's short stories, thankfully. I've been able to continue doing that via short stories. I think there's 3 out, maybe 4. I can't think off the top of my head. I'm not sure, but there's 3 or 4. There's at least 3 or 4 short stories taking place in the world of Aeon. So
Cool.
most of them are still on the continent of Egg, but yeah. Yeah, so it's something I'm continuing to kind of come back to in little bits. I don't know if a sequel is ever if a proper novel sequel is ever going to happen. I don't know that, but at the very least, I don't want to abandon that world either.
Excellent. We don't want you to either.
Or stop writing generally.
No.
Oh yeah, there's no worry about that. I can't step away from it. It's
Perfect.
I just love it too much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this has been amazing. Is there anything that we haven't asked you about that you'd like to talk about, or anything that comes to your mind?
I don't know. Not really. I mean, we've been pretty thorough about stuff. I don't know if you've had Simon, I don't know if you have another question.
Cranberry Cove. I love Cranberry Cove. That was
yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another. It felt a lot. I felt a lot more crime thriller subgenre than or closer.
And that was intentional. We had the publisher and I agreed we were going to present it as a supernatural crime novella as opposed to a horror novella, because I didn't feel that calling it a horror novella would have been fair to my usual readers. Same reason No Gods for Drowning. It has horror in there, but the primary thing is dark fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
In this sense, the primary thing for this was that it is crime fiction. It has supernatural elements to it as well, but it's not so much a horror book as just it is about these 2 criminal enforcers and their relationship and the mystery they're essentially solving, whether they want to or not.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, I think you alluded to it before, but I do love the fact that they're working for like the equivalent of the mafia, and the mafia we're cool with trans people. Yeah, we're totally accepting of your new gender identity.
Well, and that's and I was like, it's like the same reason I didn't have Viola being in All the Hearts You Eat being just this kind of like cardboard cutout bigot instead of making it more complex. And the same as like, it's so easy to have like a mob boss that's just an asshole about everything. It's like, well, why would you want to work for somebody like that?
Yeah, exactly.
So I was just like, you know what? Yeah, we're open to as far as they're concerned, we're open to everybody. Just like, be loyal and make us money.
Break legs.
That's what's important to them.
Yeah. And I think others people have mentioned it's actually probably got one of the bleaker endings of anything you've.
Yeah, I did warn people about that though. Like I warned them. Unkindly Girls is my bleakest short story. Cranberry Cove is my bleakest book. So I do try to warn people. That's the only one that has a little warning at the front, just because it is such sensitive subject matter, and I guess it was. I don't even know how much of a warning it is, so much as kind of just an explanation of just like, I'm not interested in this for shock value. I don't see any worth to that in a lot of situations, at least as far as a book's main focus. It's just because this is what I wanted to explore, and it happens to be something that's a difficult subject.
Yeah.
Is
legitimate.
Is the Cranberry Cove Hotel based on a real place, and if so, where is it, so I can really avoid it?
No, it's probably an amalgamation of different features I've noticed from different places. But no, as far as like it being a location, that's something I came up with.
Cool.
Sorry.
No. It's
no. Don't apologize. That's it.
We'll come out again.
Well, because I mean, I do think it's interesting when there's a horror, like a location in a horror story that is based on somewhere real that just happens to like just be not something you know about. Like bring up Rachel Harrison again. The weird hotel in her book The Return is based on a real hotel. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. She told me the other night, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, it's a real place. So if you want a freaky hotel like in The Return, it exists.
Yep.
I've stayed in one freaky hotel in the last year already. So I went
well, why are you asking if Cranberry Cove's a real place?
Just as I said, so I can avoid it super hard. I mean,
okay. That's that's a legit reason.
Okay. It was went down into Birmingham for it was a thing about in Birmingham in the West Midlands, not Birmingham, Alabama. It was sort of like the 10th anniversary of Joel Lane's death, so they were having an event about, and they booked me into, I think it was like a premiere in budget or something. It was a budget. It wasn't what I expected. It was like there was something. It was like, this place feels a bit dodgy from the word go. Got up to what was supposed to be my room, opened it. There's like already somebody's case and everything there. Luckily, the guy came running. There were constantly screams and shouts down the corridor. I was like, putting a chair, and then when I got the lift down, it goes up first, doors open, and there's a crowd of people. There's a bunch of guys, 2 women, and a dude with a video camera, and like a big proper who then gets into the lift and goes down with me and insists he doesn't speak any English when I ask what was going on. It's like, why would a bunch of guys, 2 women, and a dude with a video camera have been in that hotel room last? Oh! I realised if I'd actually walked into that room the other night instead of this other one. No, really, I'm wrong room. I'm here to fix the washing machine.
Well, so the Puppet Motel was a real place.
Oh God, yeah, the Airbnb from hell.
That's it. Yep, it was a real place.
Kind of weird how the Cranberry Cove almost kind of evokes the kind of location that all the Hearts You Eat is set in. That's kind of what immediately sprang to mind when I read the title. This kind of some kind of little coastal town.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing, because there's like apparently there are a couple mystery series that are called like the Cranberry Cove series, and I was just because it does kind of have like it has that sound of like, this is a nice place, and it's like, well, that's why I wanted to name the hotel that, because it sounds like a nice place and it's not.
Love it.
So not.
Well, yeah, it was a hell of. I mean, like I said, I've never been disappointed by anything of yours I've read, which is one of the reasons I'm bouncing around in my chair fanboying for the last hour and 40 minutes. Yeah, as Gemma says, it has been absolutely brilliant having you back on the show, Hailey.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great talk.
I'm glad. I'm really glad.
What's coming and what's coming out next from you?
Well, All the Hearts You Eat is out now as far as this recording. Next year, my first book from Saga will be coming out. Right now we're looking at June, but we don't have a hard date set as far as I know right this second, for A Game in Yellow, which is my erotic cosmic horror book that's kind of Euphoria meets The King in Yellow. And then I have another book out, but as of this recording, it has not been announced yet, so I can't say anything, but I'm supposed to have another book out from Titan late next year.
Wow.
Awesome. Amazing.
And we will be buying all of them.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Okay, folks. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you very much to Hailey for coming back on the show. Once again, it's been brilliant to have you. Anyone who wants to find out more about Hailey and her work, we'll be putting links to her website and socials in the description here. if you want to support No Darkness But Ours, because we have partners, families, whatever's to feed, landlords, then there'll be links to our Patreon and Ko-Fi below. If you've enjoyed this, please like, please share, please consider subscribing. And until the next time, when we return once more to decisively lower the tone of another discussion, because it's what we do, I have been Simon Bestwick.
I remain Gemma Files, and this, of course, was No Darkness But Ours.